Year 8 separation techniques knowledge test. Right, this is kind of like a very practical kind of based one. Right, and what you've got to do is you've got to know theories and particularly diagrams that are involved in it. Okay, but again, this comes in bits and bats all the way through year 9, 10 and 11, so it's vital that you need to know the separation techniques. Okay, define solvent, solute and solution. So I'm just going to write down solvent, solute and solution. So the solvent is the liquid used to dissolve the solute in. Right, so if you think about a cup of tea, right, or just any water with sugar in it, the water is the solvent. The solute is the substance being dissolved. Okay, so you've got your cup of tea, right? Water is the solvent. Water is the solvent. Sugar, tea is then the solute, which then gets dissolved in it. And the solution is the mixture of solvent and the solute. Okay, so it's kind of like the final product. Name 5 separation techniques. Okay, so what we've got is we've got distillation, we've got evaporation, we've got crystallization, we've got chromatography, and we've got filtration. Now what you've got to do is you've got to know the difference between each one of those. And again, we're only going to go very briefly into this one, but what you do need in the future is you do need to know details about each one with the equipment. Describe how you would separate sand from water, right? So, filtration. So what you're going to do is you're going to have a funnel, put a piece of filter paper in the funnel, beaker at the bottom, and then what you've got is you've got your sand plus water going in, and the sand will stay in the filter paper and the water will come out at the bottom. So filtration is extracting insoluble solids. Okay, how would you separate salt from salty water? Right, so what you've got is you've got your tripod, you've got your Bunsen burner, and then on top of there, then what you'll do is you will put an evaporating basin. So this whole process is called evaporation. And inside there, what you do is you have your salty water, right? And then when you heat it, eventually what happens is the water all evaporates away, and eventually what you're left with is you're left with solid salt. Describe how you would produce copper sulfate crystals from a solution of copper sulfate. Right, so what I've got here is I've got a beaker, I should have done the beaker, right, copper sulfate is that colour. Okay, now when you're actually doing crystals, which is your crystallization, it has to be done a little bit slower. So you have your tripod, you have your Bunsen burner, and then what you also have then is you have a beaker with water in it. Now that water in there acts a bit like a water bath. And then you get your evaporating basin on there. Now I'm going to do it blue again, which is wrong because copper sulfate is blue. And what you then do is you then heat it from below. This part here, which is the water bath, only heats up the evaporating basin slowly, so the water then comes off. And when most of the water has left or evaporated, put the evaporating basin aside, and then crystals will form. Describe how you separate water from salt water. Okay, so if you look at the difference here, separate water from salt water. What you would then do is you would use distillation. Right now, this is now where my drawing is going to be shocking. Right, so what I've got is I've got a conical flask, right, and then down here what I've then got is I've got a condenser. Okay, I'll label it all in a second. And there's a bung in the top. I'll do the bung orange. It's got a line down the middle to allow the liquid out. Bung there. Okay, in there I'm going to put my salty water. Underneath that I'm going to heat it. I'm then going to do a purple tube that goes from there to there. Alright, at the end of there I'm going to do another little tube that kind of goes like that, and then I'm going to have a beaker at the bottom. Inside this here there's cold water, okay, and that is called a Liebig condenser. Right, so what actually happens here? Okay, what colour should I use? I don't use purple or green. Right, this water here gets hot. Water boils and turns to a gas at 100 degrees C. The water goes up through this delivery tube into this condenser. Because there's cold water on each side, the water condenses, dribbles down, and eventually what you have is you have pure water at the bottom. Okay, that is distillation. Describe how you use chromatography to separate the different colours of ink in a sample. Alright, so there's my beaker. Oh, I could draw it in white, couldn't I? But that would be a bit silly. Right, so what I'll do is I'll draw my paper in a random colour. Here I've got water, and just above the line where the water is, you draw a line in pencil and you put your different colours of ink on the line, like so. And then what you do then is you leave it in there, it's kind of attached to the top, and the different colours will then move up the pieces of paper depending on their solubility. Okay, the one that is most soluble goes the furthest up the piece of paper. Keywords. Chromatogram is an image attained by chromatography. So your piece of paper at the end is your chromatogram. The mixing of a substance, the solute, with a liquid, the solvent, to make a solution is called dissolving. Right? You put your cup of tea, you put your sugar in, that's dissolving. The liquid or solution that collects in the container after the mixture has passed through the filter paper is a filtrate. A substance that cannot dissolve in a certain solvent is an insoluble. Right? That's like your sand. The solid that collects in the filter paper is the residue. Right, now, what you've got now is you've got the different techniques. You need to know the methods. Now what I've done is I've drawn a lot of those as diagrammatic forms, right? And what you've got to be able to do is you've got to be able to convert that into words. So when you're actually doing the test itself, you'll describe it as step by step. Okay, so that is then kind of your job, right? Once you've done this, right, go back, read through your kind of methods, right, to see if they actually make sense or not, right? Because what you've got to do is you've got to make sure it's constructive and it builds up from one step to the next, right? But it's also got to make sense.